impressive. Peter graduated from Duke University with a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics and from the University of Michigan with an MBA. Following a 5-year stint with an audit staff of Price Waterhouse and Company, now PwC, he embarked on a 30-plus year career in higher education executive positions. While he's now retired, in quotes, he takes on occasional interim management appointments at colleges and transitions to new financial or presidential leadership. His ongoing professional interests include capital markets and investment decision-making. Peter has been a community activist working on behalf of people with hearing loss. He was a part of the original team of HLAA board members working under the leadership of Board Chair Ann Pope to introduce the Walk for Hearing in support of the association. Working with the Rochester, New York chapter, Pete played a leadership role in bringing closed captions to live theater productions in the region, and we thank him for that. He has served 2 stints on the HLA Board of Directors from 2006 to 2013, and then rejoining the board in 2017. He's the past treasurer and past chairman of the HLAA Board of Directors. So Peter, I'm going to turn this over to you, and you can use the podium. You can use the podium if you wish, or however you'd like to handle this. I know you like to walk around a lot.
Thank you, Art. Art used the word, hello, everybody, and hello out there in Zoom land. Art used the word patience earlier on. This is going to be an adventure here. So if you'll have patience with me, I'll appreciate it. I think Mary Chiswick has volunteered to give me the high sign when I'm not holding the microphone exactly where it should be. Do you ever get involved in something where you prepared, but you feel disorganized about it? Well, that's how I feel standing before you. I really did prepare, but this won't be slick. There's no PowerPoint, and you'll see me fumbling a little bit with papers and so forth. So it's just going to be the nature of the presentation today. Art mentioned volunteers and how important it is, and there's so much going on. There's so much going on that saluting anybody doesn't seem fair almost, but I think saluting the tech crew for what they've done to get ready for today, and by name, they're Charlie Johnstone, Eric Mattson, Lauren Gallisville, Dan Brooks, and maybe some people I'm missing. I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but I know they were here starting in March working on this, and you can kind of get a sense with all the wires and the different machines that are tied together. This was quite the project to be able to do an in-person meeting and a meeting that would accommodate people coming into us via Zoom. So thanks very much. I was reading the hearing loss newsletter when it arrived, and I was struck by Henry Adler's story. And I thought to myself, I have no idea who Henry is. I've never met him. I think he's on the board and he presents a dashboard, but that's all I know about Henry Adler. And it got me to thinking that I've been away for a while and not particularly active here. And I'm wondering how many people know me. So I'm not going to go on a long biography, but I thought just talking for a couple of minutes about how I found you and what it's meant to me might fill in some blanks for some of you. We don't know each other very well or at all. It was in 2004, I believe, or maybe 2005. I was in Lucano restaurant, the Italian restaurant about a half a mile down East Avenue. I was either going through or out of a divorce. I had lost my work because of my hearing loss. And I wasn't a poor soul, but I wasn't doing great either. And so I was dining by myself, and I had one of those community newspapers that we advertise in, and there was this little ad like this, that big. And it talked about Self-help for hard of hearing meets once a month at St. Paul's. And my hearing was bad enough that I couldn't work anymore. And I didn't know anyone who wore hearing aids. I didn't have a community of supporters. I had just kept on trucking through my work. And I thought, well, this sounds like a group that maybe I should check out. So you know the story. We've all been at the point. We walked in off the street the first time, and I was embraced by Sue Miller and Barbara Law and Marcia Dugan and everyone, Vern Thayer. And I've got to say, without, this isn't hyperbole, I wouldn't be here. I mean, I don't think I would be in the land of the living if it were not for self-help for hard of hearing and these cochlear implants. The two things, the technology and the friendship and support, have been such a big deal. So that's how I got here. And I'll never be able to repay the debt. It's a big deal, and I know it is for a lot of us. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Okay, today what I'd like to talk about, just to preview, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the Hearing Loss Association Board is doing. I'd like to talk a little bit about the pandemic experience for Hearing Loss Association. And then I'd like to talk about what I'm calling here current events, what's going on now, okay? And I don't know, Art, how you want to handle questions or comments, but I'm good anyway that if people want to wait, fine. If people want to butt in, that's fine too. Okay, good. So, you tell me when there's somebody who needs to get on the floor, and they have it. The first thing I want to talk about is strategy. The Board of Hearing Loss Association works with management to develop strategy. Strategy is a top-down, very broadly cast kind of statement. It guides the focus of what Hearing Loss Association does. So strategy is developed, and it doesn't change a lot over time, but it's a way every couple of years to look at what focus is, and it gives management guidelines for what are they doing, what operations and goals and so forth do they need to plan for. So we've been talking about strategy at board, and I have a document here that's not ready for prime time, meaning it's a draft. This stuff gets written by a committee, and if any of you have ever been involved in stuff that's committee written, oh, it's like pulling teeth to get it done. But there are 5 themes, and I found it interesting in listening to Art and thinking about, this stuff really ties together. It's not like Hearing Loss Association in Rockville, Maryland is one place, and we're here doing something entirely different. We're the grassroots. We're the volunteers, the boots on the ground. National is more about advocacy and so forth. So here are the 5 themes. 1, expand, extend, increase, whatever, our reach. What's that about? There are really 2 issues here. One is racial balance. We have very little outreach, and we don't have data, by the way. I mean, we see who goes to the conventions. We don't really have a database that looks at all the people who visit the website who are members, but we just know that we're basically white, and that racial minorities have not found us, or we had not found them. So that's an issue. Second piece of diversity, and this is exactly parallel with what we've talked about here, is we've tended to attract people whose hearing loss is, what's the word, Joe, profound. We have not attracted, by and large, people whose hearing loss is moderate. And there are probably reasons for that, which we could talk about that for a whole meeting. But the sense at National, at the board and with management is, now's the time. And the driver, of course, is over-the-counter hearing aids in this Wild West environment that we're going to get into. So expand the reach of the organization is number 1. Number 2, I don't like these words, innovate and embrace technology. Basically, the idea is technology is of huge importance to those of us who have hearing loss on a lot of different fronts. And the technologies are changing, to use a word that Art talked about, change, change, change. Hearing Loss Association has been involved in this way for quite a while. I don't know that our reach has been what it should be. And there are issues of scale there and the size of the organization. But for example, I don't know if you know that you go back 5, 6, 7, 8 years, it was Hearing Loss Association that was front and center working with the smartphone. We didn't call them smartphones then. What do we call them? Working with the smartphone manufacturers to develop standards for how the phones connect with hearing aids. So we were front and center with that and developed outside of government laws and regulations that work. So it's recognition here that Hearing Loss Association wants to continue to partner with technological innovators to try to be sure that we, people with hearing loss, are at the table as technological applications are being developed. Number 3, expand and advocate public policy. This is ongoing work that the association does. I reviewed quite a bit of stuff to prepare for this meeting. And you might think, well, you're on the board, you ought to know everything that Hearing Loss Association is doing. Well, I don't know, maybe my age, I don't think so. There are just so many different activities and organizations and groups that we're working with on the national level. And I, by the way, have a report that I want to circulate outside of this meeting because it really is an eye opener what we've done the last 2 years in that regard. Area number 4, strengthen the organization, sustain its future. Well, this is kind of governance 101. Boards are responsible for being sure that there's money to finance the work of the organization. So that's kind of an ongoing thing in terms of governance. And the last focus, number 5, is strengthen the community. And this is about, and I'm going to use my words here, it's not what's on the page. This, in my sense, is seeing who we are, national and the chapters and other activists as a network, and figuring out how we can scale what we do to increase our power. I don't know what other word used, to increase our scope and our reach. So they're the 5 focuses of strategy. At some point, the language will have been signed off on, and you'll be seeing this. We'll distribute it. But I wanted you to know about that because as I was listening to Art and in other conversations, there's a lot of parallel here. We're on the same sheet of music pretty much, even though the work is not exactly the same here in what I call the grassroots and what's going on in Washington, D.C. Two other things that the board has been working on. I'm going to be very brief on this. One would turn your brain to peanut butter, but we've been developing a board policy manual. And the need for this grew out of some of us realizing that we couldn't put our hands on some of the policies that board had enacted. Where are they? We're not cognizant of these things. So we have, and this has been like pulling teeth, and there have been some straightforward discussions and disagreement, but we've essentially gone back and retrieved old policies, and every policy now is getting looked at again by committees and getting blessed by the board. It's not something you want to do every day. It's been a project that's taken over a year, but it's governance 101 stuff again, trying to be organized and keeping policies front and center in terms of the way the organization runs. The other thing that we've been working on that's a gradual change over time is having the board of Hearing Loss Association be more actively involved in the giving and getting money to support the organization. When I first went on the board in 2005 and up to pretty recently, the fundraising for the organization was the executive director would send out a letter in the spring, and then the executive director would send out a letter in the fall, and that was it. We had at one time, we had a board where not everybody gave anything. I mean, there were people who gave zero, and we had to talk about that among ourselves and change that, because the expectation is that part of what you do as a board member is you're responsible for helping pull together the financial means for the organization to run. So we've been working on that and making some very real progress with some board people stepping up and really pushing this over time. It's slow change, but it's important in terms of the health of the organization as it moves forward. Okay, the pandemic. None of this will be a surprise for you. The staff at Hearing Loss Association worked remotely, even while moving to a new office location. The old lease ran out in Bethesda, and with Michael Stone's help, Michael Stone is the Stone family representative on the board. We have secured a lease in Rockville, Maryland, just up the road from Bethesda at a better price. So this was pretty cool. But the move took place during the pandemic, and so it's been a little crazy getting that done. Walk for Hearing and the conventions went virtual on the dime. There was a convention scheduled for San Diego, and we had to secure legal help to get out of the, sorry about that, get out of the agreement. The virtual convention seemed to go well the first year, not as good as the second one, but this was a huge change when in March, the world suddenly flopped on us and we had to figure out what was going to happen in 3 months. Staff really did a wonderful job under the leadership of Barbara Kelly. The Over-the-Counter Hearing Aid Act, you know about. You know that not that long ago, Hearing Loss Association was soliciting comments for our input to that. And as of this, as we sit here now, the FDA has now received all the comments, and they're in the process of developing regulations that will govern the sale of over-the-counter hearing aids. And then there's Medicare funding of hearing aids. We had probably unprecedented success in this regard until we didn't. We had Medicare coverage of hearing aids within the bill, the Build Back Better Act, or whatever name they had given that, the legislation that has fallen flat and is no longer talked about. We had great success in keeping our needs front and center when, for example, the vision people were not having the same success. So we really were, I don't think we ever got this close before. And we had success in getting the language changed so that it was not discriminatory against people with mild to moderate hearing loss. So we were there. And then, of course, the larger political arena just, it fell apart. The legislation fell apart. But that was a huge effort with meetings with congressional supporters and aides and so forth. And the work on that will continue. All right, current events. You know about the Tampa Convention, June 23rd to 25th. I have something to read about that. Currently was April 28th. We have 265 people registered, so we're probably looking at 350 to 400 people. That means the convention will be intimate. They're just, I don't think we have market research that tells us the what's and whys of that, but I think there are just an awful lot of people who aren't ready to get on an airplane and travel somewhere and then be out and about with a lot of people in close quarters. Some of us, however, are planning to go, right? So if you haven't registered, please do. The room block is booking quickly. There are other hotels in the area, but that's just a word to the wise if you're thinking of going and you haven't done anything. The walks for hearing start in May, 20 locations across the country. You can go to the website walkforhearing.org to learn where. The first one is in Yorktown Heights in either Westchester County or Rockland County. I don't know which that is, but I need to find out because I'll be going to represent the board at that walk. Over-the-counter hearing aids. This is, of course, a really big one. We're awaiting the final rules from the FDA, and we are, even in advance of those rules, preparing informational pieces for the website, press release, and so forth. We know this is a big opportunity and an opportunity to extend our reach into populations that we really haven't served before. There will be a coordinated message and targeted talking points and outreach to the press with hopefully getting us being sources that when they want interviews, they'll come to Hearing Loss Association. Social media approaches as well. Having said all this, it wouldn't be true if I gave the impression that we know exactly how this is going to play out. I don't think anybody does. And there are so many players in this potentially selling hearing aids in ways that we'll learn about, won't we? There's a lot to learn. And I think Hearing Loss Association, along with its grassroots, keeping fingers on the pulse and trying to get a sense of how we can be useful will be a really big deal for us and for the people who need us. Medicare, the Medicare expansion, of course, is dead now in Congress, but we're going to stay with it. We'll continue to champion coverage and continue to work with groups who have the same goals. We'll keep our contacts in Congress and look for opportunities to advance this in a different piece of legislation at some time in the future. The 21st, I'm almost done, by the way. The 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, Amendments Act, which frankly, I didn't know about this until I picked up this piece that I'm reading. There's an updated version of this that's at Senator Markey's office. What this would require is that all video programming delivered via IP would be captioned. The regulations would not limit the videos just to what's shown on TV. So this is an expansion of access for podcast videos and the like. That's a big deal, and there is support, but again, the support needs to translate into legislation that's voted and then signed by the president. The Hearing Aid Compatibility Task Force works at the FCC. What they're doing is they're compiling data on all current handsets and how hearing aid compliant they are. And at the same time, are compiling data on hearing aids because it's at least 2 points that have to work together, the hearing aids and the phones. So this is a task force that we're involved in. FCC currently reports that 93% of handsets are at this point hearing aid compliant, but nevertheless, as I had mentioned this before, this is a continuation of Hearing Loss Association's efforts in this regard to have phones be useful to people with hearing aids. And then finally, the Disability Advisory Committee is a 2-year effort under the FCC, and we serve on that in leadership role. And again, this is more of a sounding board than anything else, where the FCC wants to hear from and about people with hearing loss and what our needs are. And with that, I'll open the floor to questions, comments, what have you.
With the 5 strategies, Pete, that you've mentioned, the national is pursuing, I wonder how everybody here sees how our chapter can help to support the national strategies. What can we do? And your comment was perfect when you said national is more advocacy and chapters are more support, education, and advocacy. But national's primary is advocacy. So, but what can our chapter members do? What can our chapter do to help national with this strategy?
I don't know if it's help national so much as everybody's pulling in the same direction. As I looked at these strategies, the first one was outreach. Well, how much conversation have we had at the board about outreach? We're going to libraries. There's been talk about inner cities. We're going to nursing homes. This is about outreach. We've actively talked about outreach to people who are in the over-the-counter hearing aid market. We don't know exactly what we're going to do with that, but we've talked about it. So I think it's really, when I looked at those 5 areas of focus and strategy, I marveled at how they're really consistent with much of what we do here. So I don't think it's help national so much as I say that we're basically swimming in the same direction. And if we weren't, then I would say, oh my goodness, that's a cause for concern.
I just want to comment on that. Locally, we are, I mentioned the libraries and the seniors and so on and so forth. We're also beginning to work on going into the inner city. I've been involved with inner city settlement houses for 40 years. I'm on board of 2 of them right now. And with OTCs coming and assistive listening devices getting cheaper and cheaper, it opens up the opportunity for people who could not even consider getting a hearing aid in the past to be able to do something to help their hearing. So we're just beginning this to reach in here. I think the reason that HLAA has fundamentally been a middle class and upward economic membership is because people, to buy hearing aids, they had to lay out a lot of money. And the people in the inner city that are worrying about food, and literally are just a mile from here, food and rent and all that kind of stuff, the last thing they're going to worry about is their hearing aid. So we're exploring this, okay? And we want to keep in sync with what National's doing. But my view is we can give a lot of boots on the ground input into what the reality is out there. And I don't think we really know. I don't think they really know. But we're starting to meet with the management of these settlement houses. And that's going to start to happen this coming week. And Joe and I are making a presentation down in the inner city to an outfit called the Eastern States Workers Association, which represents thousands of people that are at the lowest economic level in the services jobs, okay? And so that's a little bit of a hybrid because he's going to be talking about hearing from a medical point of view, but at least we're reaching into the inner city. And I view it's something that could develop into something that's really, really worthwhile. However, if we're successful, we're going to need arms and legs and volunteers to work with us, you know? So it's no great mystery. It's all based on economics.
That's interesting that you bring that up. we've had conversations about diversity and particularly racial inclusion at national board. And there's been no question that the board has been pretty much white. We had one black fellow who was brought onto the board in like 2013. He was there for one term and then backed off. We now recruited a gentleman by the name of Ibrahim Dabo. If you're going to the convention, you're going to love meeting this guy. You can read about him in, I think it's the most recent magazine or the one before that. It's really a good guy. But my personal take is that what Hearing Loss Association does, if you call there and you have a question, you call the phone in Rockville, you're going to get an answer. Whether you're white, black, or whatever, you get an answer. The advocacy work of Hearing Loss Association is colorblind. It is, if we're advocating for Medicare, that's not something that affects just white people. It affects everybody who would get Medicare. And if you believe that when and if Medicare covers hearing aids, that will push the commercial insurers to include hearing aid coverage, which some people think that's the way it would go. That's not just going to benefit white people. It's going to affect everybody who's covered by those plans. My point is not that we don't need to do outreach. Yes, we do. But Hearing Loss Association has been pretty much a place, you walk in the door, figuratively speaking, you're going to get help. And where the advocacy, whether it's working for compliant telephones or Medicare coverage or whatever, it's for all people with hearing loss, right? So we have the outreach to do. There's no question about that. And I think you're right. It's the boots on the ground in the communities that can get that done.
I'm sorry to keep breaking in here, but just let me add a footnote to what you're talking about. Medicare for hearing aids. What's the value of that? If you get people that have hearing loss help with their hearing, you will avoid massive medical bills down the road. And finally, the medical profession, the health professions are recognizing the harm that poor hearing loss causes to people as they become more isolated, they get dementia earlier, their health begins to deteriorate. So there's a real payback for this that's finally beginning to be recognized. So a lot of people say, oh my God, we're going to cover hearing aids with Medicare. All these people are going to rush in and they're going to want hearing aids, and it's just a waste of money. No, it's not a waste of money. It's a preventative. Like all the other preventatives they're doing in healthcare, this is another preventative, and it's got to be recognized as such. But it's going to be like pulling teeth to get it through the Congress.
Use this one.
Peter. Pete, there's a question here from Mike Miles. He asks, could National put together a speaking points presentation on the OTC Act once it is effective, and that the chapters can use when they do outreach in the community, since this is such an important act?
I think your question is right on target, Mike. And how we're going to communicate, I don't know, but it seems to me that the work to do outreach to people who are looking at over-the-counter hearing aids, that's something that we can really bring to the table. But the question is, well, what's the message and what is the help? So I mean, I think we'll look to National to bring that. I don't know if it's a toolkit. I don't know if it's written or if it's a podcast or what it is. I think my guess is whatever it is going to be something that is a work in process as we learn how crazy this new environment is. And probably we're going to know more here at times than National does. I think that this is kind of the creative two-way street where the communication really needs to go back and forth. What are we learning here that National needs to know about? I think National needs to take the leadership role in fostering those communication lines and encouraging them, particularly on this topic. Thanks.
Can I just say that Art mentioned the conference is in September. The president of the board of directors is coming to that conference and is going to be talking about over-the-counter hearing aids. So you'll have the opportunity to not only know what they are proposing, but the opportunity to ask some questions yourself, because people really want to know about this. If you haven't signed up and you're even considering going, there may be some financial support for you if you need it to go to this conference. It is the Osmonds, Marie and Donnie, their nephew, Justin, is going to be our keynote speaker. This is not something that you want to pass up that's close by. And it's very affordable. Pretty much all of your meals are taken care of. It's going to be in a great place. And I don't want to take Pete's time, but we're planning to do something about this in New York State. So you will have the opportunity to find out firsthand.
Would you mind identifying yourself for the people here in the room?
I'm sorry, I thought everybody knew me. I'm Mary Chiswick, and I'm a retired nurse, and I am the person who's chair of the task force for healthcare.
Oh, boy. Thank you, Mary. Kevin Frank is the chair of the Board of Directors of Hearing Loss Association. He's a really interesting guy. He worked at University of Pennsylvania. He worked for Cochlear Americas in Australia. He's a very smart, really with it young guy. And he'll be, I think hearing from him will be worth the price of attendance. So Mary, thanks very much. Yeah, Kevin really likes motorcycles. A footnote to this is I wonder if he'll bring his dog. He has this puppy and he is training the puppy to ride on the motorcycle. This is new for me, but anyway, he's got a rig that he can put in the back, and I don't know. So I don't know how old the dog is, but yeah, Kevin is a native of Cooperstown. So he's Western New York kind of person, Central New York person. So perfect time of the year to do that. Middle of September. Fred Altraith has his hand up. Fred, you're on mute.
You have to
Isn't he?
unmute yourself, Fred.
Fred, unmute yourself. Yeah. Sure.
Fred, unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I think the National should promote more of these demo centers, such as the one we have, which we copied after the one in Oregon or California. I don't just recall where it was. But I think that is the biggest thing that'll help people. Most people think they get the hearing aid, it's going to solve all their problems. And it doesn't. The accessories for the hearing aids are unbelievable. I recently spent quite a bit of time in the hospital. And fortunately, I'm coming along okay. But I'll tell you, without my accessories in the hospital, my microphone, one that tied into my cell phone, I would have been lost. It makes a big difference. Not only there at home, I always had, I have a loop system in my house, which I installed and I use right now. I'm living in Batavia with my daughter and we have the a system where I can hear and hear, so I can hear the TV and also have the mic. But I'll tell you, the accessories that are available are unbelievable. A lot of people think captioning is the way to go. I tried it, but I got a sore neck and I lost track of what was happening. But by using the leg loop and with all these accessories that are now becoming available, and our position here in Rochester is certainly putting on a great thing. If it wasn't for Lauren and Charlie and Dan and Art, I don't think I would have been able to work through this thing using a cell phone. I had one of those regular hearing aid, or I have a cochlear implant, but I also picked up a used smartphone. And I find that I am able, when I go onto the computer and so on, I can use that smartphone and pick up all the different accessories, and particularly where you want to increase the amount of power on your telecoil. It makes a big difference. You can go all the way from 10 to 20, which you can't do with your regular hearing aid. So it was a great, and I thank those guys that helped me out. That's my say. Go ahead.
Thank you, Fred. Fred, your talking reminded me that for years you did the tech talk at our chapter meetings. And it was like every meeting you were there with a new topic. So I can see you still have your interest in things technology and how they affect people with hearing loss. Really great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
While Dan's setting that up, I just want to share with you that a few weeks ago, we got a message from Fred that he had some assisted listening devices at his house. He had to move in with his daughter, so he wanted to donate these assistive listening devices. So I went out thinking I'd be picking up a couple of little boxes of some small devices. I got two great big containers of devices. He had his own demo center in effect. So thanks, Fred.
In the May 2022 HLAA newsletter, the demo center sessions will resume on May 19th. And it talks about the different signal alerting devices, caption, smartphone, personal assistive listening devices. The next demo session at Lifespan, 1900 South Clinton Avenue, Tops Plaza, is Thursday, May 19th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Free, all is welcome.
Is that a question about the demo center? As that goes to in person, is it also via Zoom? Or no, it's just in person, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, the last several months, I don't know if you can see me. The last several months, it's been Zoom. But it's just too hard to do hybrid in a demo center. So going forward, if we're able to be there in person, it will be in person, strictly in person.
You know, what Fred was talking about and looking at what we did today here, I'm going to make a statement. that I can't prove, but I'm sure it's true. If I look at the talent that we have here for technology, that talent and that reach that we have, National Hearing Loss Association can't touch that. There's no one on staff, not one person on staff that could carry these gentlemen's briefcases, to use a turn of phrase. So, I mean, we are hugely fortunate in what we're able to do. If it were left to somebody like me, people with my talents, we wouldn't be able to do this. So we are really, really fortunate to have your help.
Yeah, I just want to say that we're so fortunate to have Charlie Johnstone as a member. He worked at NTID for 40 years in IT, and he knows all of this equipment. So he is the mastermind behind all of this.
And Chuck,
our demo center sessions over at Lifespan are reverting to live format. But if anybody goes on to our chapter webpage, we do have a video demonstrator, a virtual demo center. And Lauren walks in these videos, Lauren walks you through demonstration of how to access all of this great information. You can find out what accessories are available for what hearing aids. You can poke around and explore all of the different items that we have on show over there. So you can go a long way from the comfort of your studio. You can go a long way towards finding out what's over there and maybe paying us a visit.
So picking up on Fred's point, as I understood it, would it be feasible that we make the availability of what you're talking about available to people across the country? Is that something that the chapter would go for? Because to me, that's a logical, that's what I'd like to see. There's so much going on across the country, but it stays in the local community. Well, if we can find ways to scale it, then suddenly the way we support each other across the country is increased.
Well, Peter, it's currently available. It's on our website. So people are coming in from different states, and if they know it's see, the problem is people don't know it's there. But it's pretty powerful the way Lauren's laid it out, because he has all the different devices we have by category, and not that we're just promoting one particular manufacturer's device. It's more the category of device. But then he has a listing of all the manufacturers of hearing aids. And if you're looking for a device that works with your hearing aid, you go to, like I wear Oticon, I go to Oticon and I'm on their website. And you can drill down through all these websites. I don't know how many you got linked to, but yeah, there's a lot of them. And the beauty of it is when you're done with that website, you go right back to where you were. You don't, a lot of times when you go search and you jump off one website and go to another, you got to go back and sign in again and go through that whole rigmarole. Lauren's got the thing set up so you just jump right back to where you were and you can keep going. So you can start comparing very quickly. So it's a very powerful tool. Even for people that visit the in-person demo center, they can go home and do a lot of homework. So this is a tool that's great. And more what I'm thinking of is National has got to think in more in terms of networking. I mean, they're representing 100 chapters, and they don't deal with individual people that have hearing loss. They're dealing with chapters. I grew up on the monopolistic telephone network before they broke it all up. And we were Rochester Tel, an independent telephone company working on with Bell System practices, even though they had no ownership in the company. So I'm very used to a situation where you can have a national advice, if you will, with all the procedures and everything else. And the people on the ground are doing all the work. AT&T never gave out dial tone, only the local companies. There were demarcs in the system. So what I'm thinking of is in the future, national should be focusing more on how do we network and how do we make even sessions like this be networked among chapters. So you get a good speaker, that one speaker can be seen by many chapters at the same time, and not make that a special thing, but make that a matter of routine.
Thank you, Art.
I just want to comment, Pete. I think everything that you're saying is great. It's fantastic. Some of you know I'm trying to write a book on this stuff, and the chapter I'm in right now is getting hearing aids. And I think the most important thing I ever came up with is that how do you know where to go to get a hearing aid? Well, you don't know. There's all these advertisements and they're enticing and what's good and what isn't. And there's over the counter coming along and what have you. And one of the things I would always tell people, at least here, is ask around. Ask around of other people who use hearing aids. How are they doing? How did they like their provider? How many visits? What kind of a follow-up did they do? And as I'm writing this book, I'm writing for more than the Rochester area, and I'm going, how do you I tell people, ask around? I mean, they're just going to say, oh, great, thanks a lot. And then I realized that we've got our chapters, our national, and we've got all the chapters all throughout the country. And how many chapters have something like our Hope session? I think a lot of them do. And what a great place that would be to ask around. If you are looking for advice, now you may not be able to get advice from people as to where to go, but you can certainly get how much do hearing aids cost? What's a reasonable price? What should anybody ever pay $10,000 for a set of hearing aids? And the answer to that is, of course not. Well, nobody knows. But there's a whole wealth of people out there spread out all over the country. I looked up the number of chapters and where they were. There's always a chapter near somebody. And I think that's one of the things I'm coming away with from my book, that asking around is the very best way to find out where is a good place to go and how much hearing aid should cost and what should you expect, what can they do and what can they not do. The other thing I want to say is I really enjoyed your talk here a lot. And before we go, could you just summarize everything that you said, just the key points? Because we get so distracted with our local stuff, which is absolutely superb. But I'd just like to have a reminder before we shut down, the key points of what you were talking about. You had your strategies and you had this and that. Shouldn't take very long to do that.
Write it up. Put it on paper, a summary, and we'll mail it to everybody.
I can do that.
Mail it to the whole membership.
Yeah, I can do that. Absolutely. That's fine. That's fine. Joe, you really, it's been a long time since I've learned that I was losing my hearing. But I take from that experience two things away. Number one, I had no interest in my hearing loss. I found it boring, inconvenience, and somehow I found John McNamara, probably from, I didn't ask anybody. I didn't know anybody to ask. So probably it was a newspaper ad, I'm guessing. But I was more interested in my family and my work. And I just ignored the fact that I had hearing loss. I took 2 hearing aids right away. Every 5 years, I would spend more money for better hearing aids and so forth. But I didn't think about finding other people. Such a logical thing. I didn't think about it. I ended up here when I was flat on my back and had lost my work. So I don't know if I'm unusual or if maybe people who are losing their hearing early on, I don't know if it's called denial or if it's just, I got other things to do. I'll muck my way through my hearing loss. And if you think that way, the way I did, you don't do much problem solving. You just keep on trucking. So I don't know, for the people, I agree with you, ask around, but for the people who are moderate to mild, just getting there, how do you get their attention? How do you get the message? Find the local chapter of Hearing Loss Association. That's what I don't know how you do that.
We're probably going to have to go pretty soon, but I think we struggle with that all the time in our marketing committee. And we got what, 5 minutes? Okay. And so I keep suggesting that we just put notices of our meetings on all the local newspapers, and every area has to have a newspaper that publishes public announcements. And well, I'm told that that's the case. And in reading the Webster Herald, that's what they said. So they're going away, but there's going to be one that's left that's publishing this stuff in print. Anyhow, so that's just a thought. And I know not everybody agrees with that, but it's free, you know, and our chapter loves free. So
Your comment about being in newspapers, getting the word out. When you stood up there, Pete, and you said there was that little ad about what this organization used to be called, Self-Help for Hard of Hearing, that little ad enabled you to go on and serve as president of our national organization, and president of 2 colleges while they were looking for another. And just think, if you had not seen that little ad that Joe's talking about, oh my goodness. I think everyone who is here, if you have a local newspaper, because we live all over. I mean, look where Judy comes from. We live all over. And if we can just make sure that we have that little ad, my goodness, just think what we could be doing.
I wonder what the 21st century, the 3rd decade in the 21st century, I wonder what's replaced that little ad. I don't know if it's social media or what. But you know, it's all about reach. How do people find out about us?
Well, Peter, I want to thank you for an excellent and challenging hour. I know it seemed to be a little disjointed at times, but there's a lot of information in there. And thank you very much. And then if you can write that up for us, we'd really appreciate that. I also want to thank the tech team that put this all together. I often say I am blessed with a wonderful tech team. I used to run an engineering department, and I'm not an engineer. And running with these guys is like having a staff of engineers. You say, we need something done, and they make it happen. You know what I mean? And they've done a great job. There's John Stone, Dan Brooks, Lauren Gallistel, Eric Matson. They do a great job on this and all kinds of issues in the technology area. And so I just want to close out by saying, don't forget the evaluations. We need the evaluations. Carol's sitting right here, and just give if it's a paper evaluation, just give it to her. And if you're online, just send it in. Okay. So thank you all for coming. June 7th, we're going to do this again. I was reminded by my newsletter editor, Bruce Nelson, who is an excellent newsletter editor, by the way, that I put at the end of my message in the June issue, not the one you have in your hand, the one you're going to get at the end of the month, that in the spring 2002 issue of Hearing Life magazine, there are 2 articles on over-the-counter. One's on page 4, and that's by the gentleman that is now the chair of the board of National. Yeah. And then the other is on page 20. But I found them interesting if you're interested in over-the-counter. My take on over-the-counter, what we can do is help people to be knowledgeable consumers when they go out to get something, that they know what they're looking for and what they should be cognizant of to avoid getting ripped off. Because believe me, it's going to be a little bit of the Wild West once these over the counters come. There's going to be equipment coming out from companies you never heard of. And so, and I viewed this when the cell phones came in. Some companies came in, they were selling a lot of stuff. It was cheap, it looked good. 2 years later, the company wasn't there anymore. What they did is they made a few $1 million ripping people off, and then they took off. Yes, Lauren. Yeah, okay. So that's it for today. And thank you all for coming. Thank you for all those who brought refreshments. We had plenty of stuff. And I can't hear you. So. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Joe Gale. Thank you for the captioning. We've been sitting here enjoying your work for the last hour. It's beautiful. Thank you.